The report will take a look at some of your feedback in just a bit, but let me bring back Abdikadir Mohammed on this. Abdikadir, there's been some proposal by the IEBC themselves who said that there should be a consideration of staggering the elections. What is the best way of ensuring elections are credible? There's also been proposals right now by liaison committee saying that we should audit the election process. How can this be made more credible?
Offline, we were discussing with Senator earlier, we have the most expensive per capita elections in the world.
Correct.
Per capita, we have the most expensive elections.
Correct.
And staggering them will only make them more expensive. At least when you do them together once, you go through those expenses once and you are done with. But if you had, the Americans, for example, have
midterm.
two-year elections for MPs, essentially quote-unquote congressmen and women, 4-year elections for president, and 6-year elections for senators. So every 2 years, essentially, they have an election going on. If we had separate elections, our most expensive per capita elections will even be more expensive. So that's why we brought them together, have them on the same day. Number two was people were worried, for example, if you had the president getting elected at one point, and then you have an incumbent president, what he was talking about earlier.
Yeah.
You have an incumbent president, no issues with the election himself or herself, and you have a parliamentary election a year later. The amount of impact from the state in those elections to interfere with those elections will be extremely high. Ideally, we should not have government interfering in terms of either resources but reality is that you'll have a lot of government. So the idea was, let's not give undue advantage to, so for example, if we had President Ruto, sitting president, and you have an election 2 years later for parliamentary, ODM will be crying foul at every corner, and they'll probably have some grounds for that. The IEBC, unfortunately, is caught up between a rock and a hard place. On the one hand, they have to hold an election. On the other hand, they never get it right. Not because sometimes they get it wrong, but ideally, at every election, somebody is going to cry foul anyway. So I am actually getting to the point where we focus too much on mistrust in our elections. Many countries have elections run by junior civil servants, and they go. Really, it's a trust issue, it's a cultural issue, it's a political issue, as opposed to it's a legal issue. Right now, we have a crisis coming in because the boundary review should have been done with by March of next year.
Yeah. Yes.
It's 5 months to March of next year. We don't even have the IEBC in place. How are you going to get to March next year and be done with the review? Probably the most difficult political question other than the presidential elections. That is probably the most difficult question. Yeah. You can't do it in 5 years when you don't even have the team in place. And that is not for any lack of law. The Constitution was very clear for the last 10 years, saying you must review the boundaries between 8 and 12 years, and the 12 years are coming to an end now.
Yeah.
Why have we not done it? Not because of lack of laws, but because we don't have the political will, and because we are playing political football with the lives of Kenyans and the constitution and the well-being of the country.
Okay.
So IEBC, they are really caught up in a very difficult position.
All right.
I disagree with the staggering
proposal. Yes. Cherargei, how do we hold credible elections now? What is the way forward?
I think I once sat as the chair in the last session of Justice, Legal Affairs and Human Rights Committee, and the IEBC intern appeared before my committee to give us the report of the elections. So I don't know what the other people wanted the audit of the elections to be done in such a manner, because they are supposed under the law to bring the report before the committees of parliament and transmission to adoption of the House. Number two, as my senior said, I don't think we have shortage of electoral laws. We have more than sufficient. I think the issue is about the trust. Do we trust our institutions? Number three, I don't agree with IEBC when they say they want to stagger elections. We have already indicated that in this region, the elections of this country is very costly and expensive. Yeah. So when you look even at the cost, the logistics, I think what IEBC is lacking in this country, and we did see the budgetary allocation, is we need to give them the necessary resource and capacity to be able to conduct an election. But above all, we should cure our own mistrust in the process, because at every turn, and I don't know, people will trust an election of an MCA, a senator, a governor, a member of National Assembly, a women rep, but when it comes to the presidential election, that is where there is a lot of mistrust. I think because the presidency, we have attached so much premium value until we no longer trust each other. So I think IEBC, there is no problem with the electoral laws that govern IEBC. The issue is with, I remember in the last session, we did postpone the boundary reviews to 2024 March because at that time we were not ready. As we talk today, there is no IEBC in place. And by March, we should agree with the review of boundaries. And you remember, Trevor, coming next year, there are many protected constituencies, even in northern Kenya, in central Kenya. So what do you do with those protected constituencies? Because they have been given a timeline to get the necessary numbers to ensure they don't stay within the protected constituencies. So these are, and I know the next battlefront from political divide, Trevor, will be on the aspect of boundary review. And now we are somewhere in NADCO discussing about so many issues. We are not ready. The people, in fact, I was surprised that some people are proposing that let each political party nominate somebody to go to IEBC. I don't know what to guard what, so that the other party don't steal from the other party. So I think as a country, Trevor, we must agree that the only solution to IEBC, give them resources, give them the capacity. Let Kenyans have trust against each other. When you see Cherargei becoming a chair of IEBC, and I don't want to be in future, when you see him become the chair of IEBC, you just draw suspicion that because he's friends to Frederick, he will ensure Frederick wins or Abdikadir. So I think there's a lot of challenge, and I hope my brother said there will be administrative policy and any legal intervention. As a parliament, I've sat as the child chairman, I can confirm to the country that we don't have shortage of electoral laws. What we have shortage of is the trust among Kenyans.
Okango, what sort of electoral reforms do we need in this country?
First of all, Trevor, the Constitution of Kenya has given the people of Kenya the type of election they expect under what we call general principles of electoral system. And it means that any election must comply with certain principles. It must be administered in a manner that is impartial, accurate, verifiable, simple, all that. That is given. But why is it that after every election, we are still not complying, or it's still believed that that election did not comply, it is not accountable, it's not verifiable? It's because of the mistrust that Cherargei is talking about. But the type of reform that for us we believe in is not just reconstitution of IEBC. We would want to see restructuring and reconstitution, and then we'd want to see elections audited so that the people of Kenya actually know that they have the issues that were addressed, and when they go to the next election, they don't reoccur again. Remember, the IEBC has a function under 88(4)H that require them, first of all, to facilitate observation, to monitor, and then to facilitate evaluation. So they have to evaluate those, they have to facilitate evaluation of those elections. So we'd want to see such reforms that bring together all that. And lastly, Trevor, also, you see, in the issue of IEBC, the same way Cherargei says that he has a right to present his views, those people, or remember the public, who believe that in reconstituting IEBC, we must have representation from different parties. That is their view. But let me tell you, we must look at a reform process that will guarantee the general principle of electoral system. Because it is until then that we cannot say, I don't care who becomes the chair of IEBC, I don't care who becomes the commissioner, I don't care who becomes the CEO. But as it is now, for as long as that is not addressed, we will care who is the commissioner, who is the chair, because there's a lot of suspicion, you know. Remember, if I don't want to open this Pandora's box, but if there can be a minority, then for sure we have a problem.
Gentlemen, we have to leave it there because we run out of time. Honorable Samson Cherargei, Senator for Nandi, Abdikadir Mohammed, constitutional lawyer, and Frederick Okango, Secretary of Political Affairs. Time is up. Time is up, Cherargei. Thank you so much for making time. And thank you all for staying the Monday Report on behalf of everybody else who made this possible. My name is Trevor Bija. Bye for now.